Jonathan, from Justin. Justin's actually been in hospital. Ross is sunning himself in somewhere else, and Paul has a couple of important sort of business meetings that he has to attend to. So I'm not quite sure about Rogan and Alan. Oh, okay. Who Alan is?
Rogan. Late apologies from Rogan. He may be able to join online later.
Oh, Alan's going to be running. Clint's on his way. And Rogan, yeah, okay. All right, so good to see you first up, Blair. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and let's get into it.
Okay, rattle through again. So this is just really an update as to where we're at from a review perspective around the Housing Action Plan. So obviously 2019 plan originally, and quite a bit of change in the environment since that time. Councillors Brenninger and Horowhenua sat with Brett Harvey and myself and just went through the old plan and looked at how that potentially aligns to the current landscape that we live in.
Yeah, just about those changes, because I'm not aware of what exactly, but I just want to check that the status for youth hasn't changed. Youth housing, it's identified in the Housing Action Plan as a priority group. Like, we haven't actioned anything in that space. So that's unchanged. I hope it doesn't get lost.
In what space?
Youth housing were identified as a priority in that action plan, and I just want to make sure that it's not lost when you say things have changed. It hasn't for them, and the problem or the need remains.
Okay, that might not show up here directly, but we're happy to discuss. So, as affordable housing, I think I guess that was one of the questions bouncing around. And in absolute terms, this is some pretty recent data. So I had been working with a guy at Auckland University who had done some work on our location in Horowhenua, and also Auckland is the other case study. So he's got these two case studies we've been working on. My house was one, with updated data. Essentially, what we're seeing, as you know, is a significant sort of shift in the market, and salaries and other haven't really kept pace with that change. So really what it means, I guess, there's sort of a number of measures out there in the world that people discuss. Around 30% is affordable and what the measure is and all the rest of it. This methodology works back the other way in terms of what people can afford, what they need to front up with to live, and then looks at what's left as a residual to enable affordable housing.
So because we use median multiple in our housing action plan, and presumably you're going to come and say, is that still a relevant measure, right?
This, as you'll see, moves away from that sort of historical multiple of 30% or whatever, because it's not deemed to be accurate, and there's a lot of debate about that stuff. So this is more about physically what people can afford after they've undertaken the process of eating and getting to work and stuff like that. This is probably it in more detail, so hard to see there on the chart, and I'll see you in this presentation, but first thing that comes out is incidentals like things that people need to live, food, transport for work, heating, that sort of stuff. Then obviously there's some taxes and rates if they apply, and then what's the residual around affordability. So what this piece of work does, and he's just completed it, but essentially in the table on the bottom right, starts to illustrate what's affordable from a purchase perspective for people who are earning in those salary brackets along the top of the table there. I've got a pointer. My pointer works. Can't see it. So you'll see in the table there's 50k sort of salary for a couple with children, through to $300,000 for the district, hypothetical. Then what it looks for is what can those people afford without austerity. Those in the red are where people were actually having to dip into and sort of dig deep to survive. And the green is you're cruising, and yellow's sort of thereabouts. So interestingly, for 3-bedroom dwellings in the district, if you're on $50,000, there's one affordable dwelling, and there's absolutely no guarantee that's for sale at the moment. So this doesn't pick up sales, available houses for sale, but what it does show is that there's quite a significant, before you get into some level of comfort, you sort of need a household income of around 150. Anything below that, you're starting to cut corners and put things back on the shelf from a grocery and other perspective. Rental is a little better, but again, not flash. So still quite a bit of duress, even up to $75,000 in the rental space. But obviously, once you get to sort of 150, you're cruising. And the numbers there, which again, like I say, I'll send it because it's hard to read on here, but you'll see the sorts of numbers of properties that are available to people in those brackets. So 50k renting is still, where's the number of suitable dwellings? I mean, there's a few, 6,000.
Blair,
Somewhere through.
do we have any idea about how much rental subsidy is being applied in Horowhenua?
No. You can find out.
Interesting. Yeah, well, it's a couple of $1 billion across the country, and I just suspect that, we probably are getting a fair share.
So, sorry, Blair. So with subsidy, we have a limit in this area in Horowhenua. I believe it's between $45 and $50 per week towards their cost for rent. No, so people that receive it, it's not including non-beneficiaries. So that's income based. So if you're on a benefit, there is a limit for this area.
But there is income-related rent subsidies that they can apply for.
Yeah. Sorry.
So part of the discussion, I guess, and part of where we started was around the concept of affordability. So Sam's talked about the measure, and I think, as you'll see, that was one of the other things that we sort of questioned or challenged on the way through. So I guess the view was, are we talking about affordable housing, which is really, is there housing available for people to purchase, assuming that they have the means to do so at a level, or are we talking about housing affordability, which is probably down the other path along the lines of salaries and some of those probably more difficult things for us to influence as a council. So probably more the day-to-day living stuff that's not directly aligned to where we are. I guess in the view in the discussions, wrong clicker. Essentially we got to the point of suggesting that the existing vision of Homes for All was fine. We retained that. But the focus shifting more to affordable housing and the provision and making available and supporting that direction more so than that around affordability. And probably, like I say, one of the key things in the last housing action plan was around, there's a sort of statement around improving the salaries for people in the district, which is quite a big macro effort. Hard to measure, hard to know if we're having an effect, and it's whether we've put lots of effort into that.
Maybe you're not looking for an answer, but from my view, it's both. Because the second one applies to rates, which is a big consideration for us.
Yep, yeah, agreed, because I don't think those questions, I don't think it is binary. I don't see them as being they're all.
The confusion is it's a correlating
relationship, right? So if we focus on fundamentally, the second one focuses on the ability for someone to be able to purchase a home and live. However, the top one has an impact on that, because if demand on housing is low, so we've got low volume, it's going to force pricing of houses up. And if pricing on houses go up, that's going to put a strain on the housing affordability measure, because they have to borrow more and pay more for it. But it also goes the other way, that if housing supply is abundant, it drives the lending required down, or the house price sale down, which actually then contributes towards making it more affordable, because people can buy houses that are cheaper and can afford to borrow more in order to do so. So it's sort of, number one, potentially determines where in a market cycle you actually fall, is to how affordable it is. So I think the ideal is probably statement number 2, is where we want. That's the outcome that we're looking to achieve, is that those that want to buy a home can buy a home, and ideally manage that seesaw of making sure that when they are ready, that there's homes for them to purchase.
Yeah, except that number 2 presupposes those are about the people who have access to houses currently, be it rentals or ownership. So that's why number 1 is essential in terms of where the point of this discussion for us in a council environment. Very much it's a focus about number 1 in order for number 2 to occur. I don't know whether we're going around in circles, but yeah, to me it is both.
Yeah, look, and it is both, I guess. In the next slide we'll get to, we'll talk a bit about the things that we can really influence and shift from a council perspective as well. So I was trying to hone in on where we best sit and what we can best influence, and putting rates. Surely that's one we can, but like I say, increasing salaries or earnings across the district is a much bigger macro piece, which would be difficult for us to shift in real terms and measure. So where do we start? The other thing, I guess, of the prior plan was really around some sort of baseline measures. So there weren't a lot of baseline measures as to where we are and where we were hoping to go to. So in sort of doing what we've done in the time I've been here, and that's probably largely been me, but I guess my nervousness comes in our ability to illustrate what's going on and put that in front of you as council to say, well, actually there's a bunch of stuff going on, but it's not, how do we define and determine if we've been effective and shifting the dial? So a good start is sort of around trying to establish some baseline measures. There's obviously a housing waiting list, but the trick with some of these things is we could build, we could contribute 200 houses to the housing waiting list and make it go to 0, but tomorrow it could be 250 because there's always more people coming. So it's how do we make sure we can continue to track and measure those differences that we're making in the space. So aim to sharpen the focus of the initiative and provide more clarity and direction towards sustainable affordable housing as a journey, and add baseline measures. So start to get some baseline measures that we can look to, like we might have one universal design house per 1,000 people in the district. Demand for the district might be 5 per 1,000. So how are we influencing or affecting that to change that metric? So what's council's role? I guess the other thing we sort of looked at is where do we sit, and there's a bit of discussion in this space. In my view, I guess our core skills, capabilities at the moment are probably around enabling and influencing through the tools we have available as a council. are we a developer? We've sort of sold our social housing previously, but there was certainly a discussion around whether that is something we should re-entertain or not. Are we just going to observe and do nothing? I think the short answer. Oops.
Has the MSD or the rule changed around the income-related rental subsidy that Bernie raised earlier? Because that was one of the key reasons why we let the pension housing go, and it's because as long as council owned it, they didn't qualify and it fit the criteria to get that subsidy. So I'm just checking the situation changed.
No.
Okay.
Councils are still exempt from the IRS. Or sorry, tenants are exempt if they are a tenant of a council facility.
I think the role, what you've got up there is almost pretty much right. So our role is certainly an enabler and an influencer. And we can do that through our district plan changes and our settings and policy stuff. The developer is a question mark, and it's a question mark because we shouldn't be a developer, but there may be some tangible outcomes that we want to be really targeted with that may see us playing the role of a developer. So if we take the fact that we want to see more 1-2 bedroom homes built in our district because that is where the need is, and there is an opportunity for us to act as a developer to deliver 50 2-bedroom homes into the district, then that's when we would make a very deliberate choice to do so. Partnering with a developer that may focus on those more affordable housing ranges where potentially the land is owned by some form of trust, like we've spoken about, and they just borrow for the build aspect of it. Again, council potentially could be the landowner, or a mechanism of council could be the landowner making the land available on a lease, but allowing the building and the funding to be done independently by the people that are going to live in those homes too. So I think there's a role to play, but when we're talking about developing, it's about being very targeted and understanding what we're getting out of it, and that talks directly to essentially providing supply of the right type of homes at the right price, so that ultimately that second statement becomes true for more people.
Agree with 1 and 2. Developer, it's about what we understand the word to be. If the word developer is about being in the business of the build, of the actual build and construction and so on, then I would be opposed to that. We've had a pretty troubled history in the past, Foxton Beach being an example of where council has tried to be a developer with very limited success, but absolutely setting the rules in terms of be it the district plan or whatever other mechanisms there can be in order to try to get the outcomes we want. And again, we've done this directly through organisations such as Kainga, or we work in partnership with them, but not directly develop.
If the core issue seems to be that people just can't afford it, how is it that we can do anything that changes that basic problem? If it's all very well to sort of say, oh, are we going to be an enabler or an influencer? But, okay, we'll make it easier for people to build another 20 houses, but if they're all $700,000 homes, it changes nothing. I just don't really, perhaps I'm being a bit dim, I'm not sure, but I don't see how we can actually be an enabler or an influencer when the problem's about income.
100% with you, Mike, because I think that council can play a role, right? We can play a role, but if we think about all the components of housing, which is land cost, the regulatory cost to build a new home, and then the actual construction costs, like looking at the numbers, household income growth in Horowhenua over the last 12 months was 5%, but construction related costs was like double that, and so you're always going to be, potentially playing catch up. So we can only do a part of that, right? Like in terms of influencing policy settings to reduce part of the cost, but we haven't got control over all of those variables and factors and other parts that drive up the cost of housing. So I'm with you. I think that we have to put some context and some really clear parameters around what role we're playing and what we can, why what we're doing to try and influence or enable, acknowledging that we're only one lever and that there's a whole lot of other buttons that need to be pressed in order to get to the outcome that we want to. So I'm with you. I think we've got to be really careful about the expectation that we set and create in terms of our role.
So I'm still unclear. Are you a tick X or?
What I'm saying is that yes, we're an enabler and yes, we're an influencer, but there's some parameters to that, because we can influence the cost of land by ensuring that our policy settings through the district plan encourage supply. But you don't want to get to a point where you oversupply, because then people go, well, it's not, why would I develop if I'm not going to make any return on this? So, like, there's an element of influence we can have, and we can also, there's a limit in terms of what we can enable, but we've got no control over construction costs. Yes, we can influence the cost of a new property in terms of the pricing of regulatory related services, but again, we're constrained because we have to cost recover. Someone has to pay for that service. So I think that yes, but there's some constraints to it.
There's also been conversations around land provisionally and what's on the disposal list. So there's all of that plays into that. So not, and some might have reservations or just simply don't want to do that, but those are all decisions that will go through this table and land differently for different pieces. So it's.
I sense we're agreeing on the two key factors. It's just a question of the extent to which we have levels of optimism about the extent to which we can be influencers and or enablers.
Well, I'm with you. Your earlier point about not in the construction, but in other ways, in partnerships with KO or other government agencies.
Absolutely. District plan I wouldn't underrate, and Horowhenua company opportunities working with partners other than KO.
So I kind of go back to what I was kind of wondering in the beginning. I think there is I take your point, Sam, we need to concentrate on what we can actually do. I think that given the situation that the whole country's in around this, there is very little we can enable, and there's very little we can influence. So to some extent, this is a rabbit hole that I don't know that there's any value in time, energy and resources going down, to be completely frank.
It's one of the reasons why we employed Blair, was to try and actually have an influence and enable some of that stuff to happen. And we are, I believe, playing a role in terms of doing that. And we've seen examples, I believe, of the way the market has changed because we've influenced, I think, and enabled some of that. You've only got to look at, what the Wayne Bishop Group are doing in Honeymoon Street with that CHP, community housing project they're doing, what's happened in Mobile Street, particularly targeted at affordable housing. I think we do have a role to play in terms of being able to influence that sort of thing, and there's been more, the government have already signalled that they'll be giving, hopefully, back some of the consenting money that we're going to receive, they're going to receive. So, I think we do have a part to play. We can't ignore it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I totally accept that. I think what I agree with Mike around is that there's got to be some realism to this, because what if we pull a lever or we press a button, what are we actually influencing? What are we actually enabling? And so, like, I think that the more targeted we can be in terms of what we're doing, and I think of the Livinable project in terms of, we're going to end up with, through partnering with Kāngora, we're going to end up with some universally accessible houses for people that, really need that kind of housing that's going to be suited to their particular needs and limitations. And so I think that's a good example of where we can be a direct influencer of, even if it's at a small level. But yeah, in terms of the enabling and influencing, I think it's the district plan policy settings in terms of encouraging supply of land. But look, I think we do have to be realistic about how much we can influence that price in terms of new homes, other than through increasing land supply and potentially tweaking regulatory costs. Like we just don't have the influence in terms of the actual construction costs of building a new property. So it's land and regulatory cost.
Just reminding council that this is a live streamed workshop, and so just important we don't discuss in detail any in committee decisions council might have made.
I think, great discussion, because all the things you're talking about is really what we're trying to target through this is probably sharpening the focus, getting to more direct outcomes. Sorry, Clint.
Could you just flick back to the household income piece? So I can't remember off the top of my head what the median household income for the Horowhenua is, but it's less than the national average, right? When we've got a median house price currently of about 515,000 last month, it means when we look at this, we need to be able to determine that actually 515 means that our households need to reach an income of $100,000 in order for that to be affordable. And the biggest issue that we've got, and it's one of the aspects that we can look at opportunities to influence, not only through our land settings, but it's through our economic development settings and our employment opportunities, because like it or not, only 40% of our population in the Horowhenua work full time. 60% work part-time, are unemployed, or are not in the labour workforce. So if you're not working, there's no way you're going to hit a household figure income of 6 figures, are you? So, yeah, one of the aspects of that is around how can we provide more jobs and more opportunities and grow the incomes, and that will directly flow into what the housing affordability looks like as well. So some of those levers are hidden in economic development and providing new jobs and job opportunities at good paying levels, and that will help influence the story too.
Yes, so part of this, like I said, part of the discussion really was trying to sort of hone down, I guess, to Sam's sort of point is, in the way I was sort of thinking is around, we put $1 in, we get $1.50 back sort of thing, versus putting $1 in and getting $1.01 back. So it's just really trying to hone in those things that we can really influence and create a difference through. So this was a bit of a list come up with, which was, contains some of those things you just talked about. So provision of affordable housing tools, building more affordable more affordable homes and influencing that. There's a number of ideas around that sort of stuff. You could have, preferential scenarios around sort of brownfield infill, where you put a whole bunch more units like through the streamlined housing process into a piece of land. Can you influence that stuff and bring those costs down and those units up? to provide more opportunities. So there's a number of levers in and around there, but again, coming back to council-centric stuff. Improved incomes, creation of affordable housing options. We talked about some other potential developments and some that are already underway with privateers. Assisting planning and budgeting, that's on a very sort of personal level, probably not our space. And the other one that's been talked about a bit already is around sort of optimising government, sort of council policy programs direction to really try and, improve stock availability and properties at the right prices. So in this space,
I think
we sort of got to.
I think there's another one on there that that's kind of maybe it's captured by the fourth bullet, but it's something that Mike's raised previously around like increasing the ability for people to have those granny flats, the small one bedroom sort of things on the back of properties, because that obviously meets a particular market requirement, but it also potentially reduces pressure on stock, because you've got people that are potentially occupying 2 or 3 bedroom houses that could then move into a more, and so like I wouldn't underestimate that as an important sort of tool in our toolbox in terms of trying to get the outcomes. And
Sorry. These are the existing actions from the current action plan, and really was interesting exercise just to go through that process of sort of looking at the potential impact we can have with the volume of effort required. You can't read that. I'll send you the view with more detail on it, but and then also some things that maybe should sit outside the plan. So there were a couple of things in there around, as Clint's raised, around creating job opportunities in the trades to try and promote growth to enable more houses to be built. The thinking, I guess, in that space was we've already got MES Task Force for Jobs, we've got UCOL down the road, we've got GoGet. There's a number of providers already, so do we create another one, or do we work with those to actually provide that service and play that role, which a number of them probably already are playing that role as well. So some of those, that's probably a couple of ones you see on the right hand side there, shifted outside the chart, but looking at the things that we've been doing, and from a proceed sort of top left corner, the stuff that's sort of limited effort, biggest impact, it was good to see that a number of the current actions landed in that space. So this is was hoped to make it a bit easier to read, but no. I'll send this presentation out. You can have a look and comment. Measure of success, I guess that's the other thing that sort of discussed was unclear and difficult to grasp in the current plan. So I was really trying to bring that back in as to how do we illustrate the effectiveness of what we're doing. So, things like the housing register, build contribution, public-private. I mean, do we add we provided DC remissions to the 43 in Hinimoa in a private capacity, but for social housing, we should add that to our list and tell that story. But that may sit alongside some others that we've enabled through other providers on that list, again, contributing to what we've actually built and contributed to or influenced and enabled. Targeting like the housing register itself with 200 people on it. As we know, we've got more people coming and going through the district. There are more coming, I'm sure, with all the pending developments. So, thinking there's an end point to that is probably the right, was sort of where I was trying to shift the thinking away from. So, more of a journey than an end point. And so then how do we actually illustrate our progress, along that journey? Calendar dates for consent processing, we talked about that. So that's stuff we can influence internally. It's not going to be a massive driver, but if we can turn around consents faster, then obviously builds can come to the market quicker. That provides cash flow into the local economy, which obviously fuels jobs and all those things. So we do play our role. If we're really tardy in that space, we can obviously impact significantly the cash flow of the district. So there are a number of things in there that we at council can influence and make a difference in. So it's really trying to nail those. I don't know if I've nailed them all. I don't know if I've nailed any of them. But it's really trying to get something to a space so we can get in front of you and say, hey, here's how we're going as a district in this space. So really targeted outcomes, seeking support, and obviously open for discussion. I'll hand out a bit of paper here which has this on it. You can tick and draw and write and whatever you like on it, feed it back to us. But really I was looking to take the housing action plan sort of from a 20-odd 30-page document really into a frame on a page. So trying to condense those key directions and initiatives and roles and levers into a page, so we can have it in front of us like some of the other things we've done. Shift the focus on affordable versus affordability. So that's again just around sort of impact and effort and our ability to influence housing stock and methods versus our ability to influence salaries across the district. A little bit more difficult. Develop a sound baseline so we know what we're working off, so we know that that predominantly we need 1 or 2 bedrooms. Like Sam's pointed out, does that mean that engages a full-on push in the granny flat space, because that could help us out significantly in creating some of those 1 and 2 bedders? Does that mean that we provide DC remissions for granny flats where we don't currently? So you got to drop one on your back of your section, and at the moment you're hit with a bill. Does it make sense? Is it logical and sensible if we're trying to get infill and trying to grow and provide opportunity in that space? I mean, those will be discussions for later. Clearly understanding our role. I think the old plan had a lot about advocating to government and things like that. Like, we can spend a lot of time and effort on that, and probably the $1 invested is sort of 97 cents returned. So it's just really one of those things that we can actually, you've invested in this as a plan. Where do we put a shoulder to the wheel and make it happen to get the best return for the district? So that's sort of around that external influence, so external enabler. Levers that drive the growth, so we talked a bit about that, and I think that's tied to development of ideas. So I think it's not a fixed housing action plan either. It's an open, sort of living, breathing, continuous improvement type document space. I think we'll continuously have new ideas and opportunities that come to the table from many different spaces, and it's how do we put those through a process to see where we get the value. Impact versus effort. Again, like I say, ideally if we can put $1 in and get 2 out versus putting $1 in and getting $1 back, then it's really trying to focus on that stuff at the front end. Focus on process measures versus endpoint measures. So that's rather than having a target to get rid of the housing waiting list, is actually to know that it's still at 200, but we've built 600 houses towards it. So it just keeps moving. That's what we've got potentially. Acknowledge that it's a journey and not a destination. So every day, myself, I went to something yesterday. Every day you learn something different and new and different angles and different opportunities around how do we nail this one. And it is it's still a massive issue, and a big issue around the country and certainly around the district. So for me, it's how do we understand more about it and how do we have more impact into it. So sort of shifting from a bit of a housing action plan, which feels a little bit like it's got an endpoint, to really sort of an affordable housing framework, which is sort of more open-ended and setting it down a different path. These are some ideas, but from a council perspective, what might the future bring? Vacant urban land, brownfield bonuses for multi-unit development. Maybe there's some incentives for doing multi-unit stuff rather than neutral or disincentives. family flats, Sam's talked about accelerating land use approvals, attracting new investors, contributors to affordable housing, designing policy and regulations to boost affordable housing. So again, we can control some of that stuff internally in the district. Improve build processes, productivity. So that's again something that my team can improve, both out there in inspection time and processing time, and so that end-to-end build piece and the cash flow tied up in that we can improve. Supporting promoting modular yard build construction. So there's a number of parties around the place. You start enabling and influencing connecting these, and obviously you can get a yard built dropped on the back of your section as a granny flat with a DC remission maybe, and that becomes a viable affordable housing option for a number of people. Accelerating consenting processes talked about, aligning development contributions and relief with housing objectives. So there is potentially nothing to say we couldn't, if someone's building a 10-lot development like a Maple Street, that we couldn't in time have, a requirement that 3 of those are, 3 of the 30 are targeted affordable housing opportunities as part of the development. Maybe alternatively, you're going to build 30, so there's a $1,000 contribution to affordable housing in the district that's required coming from the developer, so that could go to a fund to create other initiatives within the district. These are all ideas, and we'll obviously bring them to the table, but there are a number of ways I guess we can make a difference. Family flats, which Sam just pointed out, so this is just a little pet of mine. Lisa's team's done a great job of getting us to this point with a bit of a draft, so you see there's got proof on it. But really what this does is this takes district plan, which is no offence, David, but very hard to decipher for humans. You open a district plan, it's very difficult to get to, and it's because there's a number of different rules coming from different spaces in the book, in the plan, that contribute to building some of these outcomes. So if you try and set someone into the district plan to find all the rules that apply to building a family flat and consolidate them together into a view that they can understand, it's near impossible, because I've tried. What this does is really pulls all that stuff out for the people and says, right, here's your distance to boundary, here's your height recession plan, here's the sort of space you need from a site coverage perspective on your lot to enable you to do this. Here's how you should orient it to the north to get some sun. And in time, and what we're going to pilot with Shannon through this, because there's some interest there, is the next, wrong button, but the next step is we take, when we go on this journey, we take these guides to enable people who come along to the session. We also take maybe some of those modular house builders that are in the district along as well with hey, we can do a 2-bedder for $180,000, and we also take some people along from the bank who say, hey, $180,000 on the back end section is going to increase your capital value by this, it's going to cost you this much, and it's actually going to come in a lot cheaper than renting. You've already got an asset to put against it. Then you can kick your grandparents out the back and live in the house yourselves or something, because there will be multiple families potentially living in some of these homes. So it's about how do we take that solution out. We can even look at GIS and say, well, this many, because Shannon's got big sections. So we could mail this out and say, hey, we've noticed your section is well suited to enabling this. We're not going to change the DCs for next month if you get into it from the sales side, but if we take that whole story out, then I think you can go and say, hey, this is doable. See, you can take measure home in the weekend and measure, so you can tick that box, and that's what this guidance is a tick box. Can I do it? Hey, here's some options that they'll drop it off a trailer onto your house, so you don't have to mess around too much, and they're not that expensive. And by the way, here's the financier to say, to illustrate to you that it's actually not going to cost a lot more than rental. Are you keen? So it's, again, it's really sort of trying to enable influence and pull together a number of parties to provide an outcome, which I think can absolutely change the space, from an affordable housing perspective. That's the little trial that we'll run anyway, because the school principal came to me a while ago and they're losing kids from school there, and they're having trouble with people being pushed out of town because prices are going up. So it's how do we enable people's assets to work for them that they've already got. This I'll hand out. So, a lot of that I just walked through is on this page. Just ask you to probably go through it. I've stuck some stuff in red where we said, look, we don't think we're a observer, we're a neighbour, or if you think it's different, if you think we should just sit there and observe, then write on it. Also in there is a number of ideas. The blue ones highlighted are current housing, so all the current housing action plan headlines are in there. They're in there in blue. And they are still in there scattered throughout. You'll see a number of them right at the top we've been working on. Some have been extended on, and then there's been some other additions. The only ones that we've sort of sought to potentially move out of the plan, and that's why Brent was in the room originally, is because I think the original plan came out of the community development space. And from my space versus Brent's space, things like Mayor's Task Force for Jobs and the like, and also his their ongoing interaction with the Pacifica community and the like is where we're suggesting we'd input into those forums rather than necessarily try and create them and run them through the plan. So some of those you'll see have been shifted out. Remission from rates for Māori land is in play, but there's probably a little sideline to that is that doesn't necessarily cover housing or any growth on Manawa sites themselves. So that sort of Papakainga space is certainly a space that would come into the plan, and that obviously we'd look to grow into as well. So I'll leave you a few minutes, but if you want to just rattle through there, make comments when you feel, and just hand it back to me at some time, then we'll look to frame it up. But the idea is to try and get into a page with a frame that we can then start to work more directly towards.
Acknowledging we're in public workshop, so you might not be able to answer this, but one of the things I was thinking about in terms of that investigate space was settings that discourage land banking, but that assumes that land banking is a problem in our district, and I'm not sure it is. Are you able to comment on whether that is a problem for us in terms of, certainly there's some examples of land banking in a commercial industrial land context that I'm aware of, but I'm just not sure from a residential perspective, is land banking a problem?
Yeah, look, I think from a commercial industrial, like you point out, yes, I think there's probably an issue there. Hard to comment more domestically, but I think you'll see there, Sam, there is one around sort of land value rate positions by zone potentially to promote infill. So certainly I guess that's something to look at, is to say actually how do we, there are empty sections sitting around and people are waiting to do stuff, but the market's turned so they're doing nothing. There's some just down Bar Street here. Can we influence that in some shape or form, either positively or negatively? I mean, you'd argue increased rates is negative, depending on where you sit. Or there could be other, there could be some DC remissions if you get on with it. I said to Monique a while ago, a great thing now would be, and we're not in that space, but, if we'd had DCs for a while and we're in good shape, then, as demand drops off as it has done, it would be great to be able to turn around and say, right, no DCs for a period while the market's in a hole, so it flattens out our demand through the business, which would help us, but also obviously continue the sort of progress through the district in terms of builds and jobs and the like. So there's many things we can look at.
So from here, we're working towards a target to bring a report to the 13th of December council meeting that has the draft housing action plan for endorsement. Obviously, Nina and Ross have been supporting Blair in this work today. Today was a check-in to kind of check on right track, to get some of that feedback around where council starts to put its focus. So Blair, maybe just summarising, like, what do you exactly need from elected members today to give you confidence that you can go away and write that report and finalise that work?
Sorry, probably just this page really around. Like I said, we'll send this presentation out to you, but really just I guess acknowledging the shift. So there's a subtle shift away from probably more towards stock and things that we can influence at a greater rate, to a greater value, to a greater extent. So it's sort of shifting a little bit away and probably becoming more dynamic than the housing action plan as it is. It was quite set and a little bit rigid, and if I was critical, probably didn't have a lot of measures attached to it. So it's really like, how do we shift away to things we can influence, make it more dynamic, because ideas and opportunities will come and go, and then create some measures around that so we can actually illustrate where we're going, and that our dollar spent is bringing us $1.50 and it's well worth continuing. So most of it's on that page, but also in here, and to your point earlier, Pity, if you think there's a gap around rangatahi housing or the like, just jot it down. I think we encompass it. So even some of the developments we're talking about now, on a potential land lease type basis, public or private, that will open up space for all of those parts of the plan. So it's definitely on the table. But write it down there, and ideally we try and bring it back to a page. That's what I'm hoping to do.
Blair, thanks Nina and Ross for the input that they've had as well, and like that makes a whole lot of sense, and I kind of really agree with everything that you've captured. I just wonder, for the purposes of that 13th of December report, would we be able to get some advice or a recommendation around maybe the 3 key moves or key focuses for the coming 12 months, as in these are the bottom line non-negotiable things we're going to do in this space, and so like the 3 things that have come sort of to the surface for me are the granny flats. I think that's that's awesome. The releasing surplus land, council-owned land, for those kind of or type partnerships. Like, if we can keep doing that, because we're having some success in that space, and then potentially the considering or investigating those district plan settings to both increase land supply, but also the incentivise or encourage the intensification. Like, those for me feel like the 3 sort of key moves or key focus areas, acknowledging that a whole lot of this other stuff will continue to be investigated and continue to progress. But I think that might be helpful in terms of that council report. I don't know if others agree on that, but I think being really clinical about the key moves that we want to focus on and put some energy and resourcing behind for the next 12 months I think it's an important signal to community and to the organisation.
I'd agree with that actually, because even this page is a massive amount of stuff on here, and we're not going to be able to obviously do everything on there anyway. So if we can pick 2 or 3 things out that we know we can continue to focus on, I think that would be really advantageous. Thanks, Blair.
Oh, hang on a minute. Clint was going to say something.
We both look at each other.
No, you go first, because I'm just reading.
Look, I'm keen for that, because I think it's important that we've got 2 or 3 clear things that we're looking to deliver on. I'd probably encourage a 1 to 3 year piece, and really, I guess sort of highlighting visually at what stages in that 1 year process that focus would potentially sit over. Because I think one of the criticisms of the housing action plan is that, well, what's it actually done? What has actually been delivered, and how is it translated to addressing the affordability issue? So, yeah, I think being mindful that we want tangible stuff that we can say we tried, we failed fast if we failed, or the take up is like the streamlined housing process last year. Good thing to do, made sense, potentially even had the numbers that we might have expected, might have utilised that. But again, there could be a slow burn aspect to it.
So this attracting new investors piece, I was hoping that by now, since the formation of the action plan, council would have touched base with either Sisters of Compassion or Willis and Bond, who we also gave bare land to, with an expectation that at some point they would develop that into these 1-2 bedroom units. As far as I know, nothing like that has progressed. And I would like to see action taken at, I don't know what point, or whether that even needs a decision or you can just get on with it. The other thing about the youth housing and how that action plan actually morphed into what it is, and obviously what it's moving to. Our youth services network, after some number of meetings, we put a discussion paper together. We took it up to community wellbeing, and Barry Judd at the time, then, there was discussion had at that higher level, and they all agreed that they would have a housing forum as a result of our absolute need for housing young people and the lack thereof. And then it became an action plan, and now it's moving to this, and we still, we were quite specific. We defined the problem. We were quite specific about who the partners could be or should be, and hoped that council might be in that land or some sort of mechanism, at least facilitating or leading the conversation with those partners to either produce a youth hostel or some sort of small type village of sorts where it catered to that. And the likes of central government coming to the party too. And that's, while that might not be everyone's focus, it's a genuine need that I hope will have some appetite around this table to see support going forward in the mix of all of that.
Just on your first point, Piri, absolutely, we've met with Sisters of Compassion, and there's multiple conversations that have occurred, and there is stuff in the pipeline about the land out there, but also conversations about Waimere Park. There's work in train. Blair probably has a recent update, but probably just wouldn't be appropriate for us to comment on it in a public forum, maybe.
Yeah, and that's I think in the next, probably next week, I think at council meeting you'll get more insight into what's going on as well. But it's quite difficult. We're often in a space where a lot of the stuff's commercially sensitive and not for market. So it's hard to, just been trying to find that space to how do we communicate and illustrate without giving away, I guess, commercial sensitivity. So it's a bit of a tricky space at times, but we're absolutely in those spaces doing some of that work.
I think the key message that I'm hearing from Piri, though, is that let's make sure that focus around the needs of young people in our community is not lost in the review of the housing framework action plan. Yeah, clear message. Councillors, Caro's going to lead us off, and she'll talk about what we've got to get through today. What I'd ask of you is if you want us to go faster, like if you feel like the pace needs to be faster because of some of the pre-reading you've done, then like give us that signal. That I've pre-warned Caro of that. And obviously the conclusion of this public workshop, we will go into public excluded, and that's when we will start discussing the financial options which ELT have been preparing for you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Monique. And yes, today we move from into shaping information into options in our process in the LTP. So in terms of our jigsaw puzzle, we are both identifying issues and developing options. And that's the focus of workshops today and the next two, the 6th and the 13th of December. So we are moving to getting the picture of what the budget's issues and opportunities currently are, to shaping those issues for consultation and rates options as well. They are two key pieces of our puzzle, our picture, and the gritty topics. And I was thinking this morning that I maybe should have had them both as sky pieces, as some of the hardest to place in jigsaw puzzles. And today our session is designed to give you some more context for those discussions that follow. So shortly, I will pass over to Monia and Lisa to share the feedback from the early engagement, where we asked about the focus of the long-term plan, the early shaping, waste and recycling, climate change and shared pathways. Then handing over to Charlie, Ashley and Rob to talk about the SSP review process and what has been done to date, sharing the draft proposed SSPs, the next steps, and presenting the final draft SSPs for inclusion in the LTP consultation document. The third piece is to share and discuss updated fees and charges. Sean, Vi and Mark will talk to you about that. The questions that we are asking today, and these will pop up at the end of each of these sections in the appropriate place. Whether the early engagement feedback changes any direction you have given about the content of the LTP, or may spark some additional direction you wish to provide. For both SSPs and fees and charges, whether you are happy with the proposals or would suggest others. And in our triangle, we remain firmly in the do part, where we seek your ideas, direction, as we work through. And on that, I'll pass the remote to Monia, who will lead us off about early engagement feedback.
I actually do have a lot of slides, but I'm going to go quickly through it, and I'm not going to spend time on the results of the survey because you had it as for pre-reading, but they're all there, so we can go back and forth if you would like to discuss any of them. As you all know, Council started with a long-term plan, and we wanted to check in and hear from the community what should be included in the next LTP. We used this opportunity to build awareness about the long-term plan, why it is important and what should be included, and how the community could be involved. We followed your lead and kept it low-key with asking specific questions and not driving any specific topics or leading the conversation in a specific direction. Only talking about what is the LTP and asking whether we are on track and whether we've missed anything. The ways that we engaged, we used a multi-channel communication campaign, driving the community basically to the Let's Corridor page to give us feedback. The campaign ran for 3 weeks from the 17th of October till the 10th of November, and the basic communication channels that we used was the Let's Corridor online community engagement platform. We did articles in the Community Connection twice, We had 2 events, couple with a counsellor with a focus on the long-term plan and the age on the go. And we also used e-newsletters, which was the first that we've used, which actually worked very well. Sent out a media release, and we did a lot of social media posts. The channels that we used for social media is basically Facebook, Insta, and LinkedIn. We published in total 17 posts, social media posts over the period of the 3 weeks, and we nearly reached 25,000 people who saw our posts. 840 people click through to links on the socials, and yes, the benefit of social media is actually that it is really low advertising spend if you boost the post, and we didn't boost all the posts, so quite a good reach for low budget. A lot of our creatives didn't get as much as engagement as we would have loved it to have. The reason for that was, I think we had 3 or 4 campaigns running at the same time. Freedom Bylaw, Rights Remission, Long-Term Plan, and then we were also competing with Diwali and Santa Claus and those things as well. So all our social media posts, even while they were boosted, compete with each other. So just something to bear in mind in future as well when we engage. And all of these social media were driving people to the Let's Corridor page. But I think overall we did good, and yes. I just added some of the face. Can you hardly probably see what's going on there? But this was the first social media post that we started off with, the video of Mayor Bernie, where we actually had a total of 622 clicks from this social media post. And also, I think it's good if you take into consideration, lately people don't spend a lot of time on videos. They look for 30 seconds, and that was quite a long video, which people also do watch. Out of the 323 links that were clicked, it could also be a link to the video, Let's Corridor page, and even to Mayor Bernie, because there was a link in the post to Mayor Bernie's social media page. We also had some other, just a few examples of some of the social media posts that we did. They were both paid advertising to increase the reach, and the post on the left side reached 6,400 people, and 137 people clicked through to the Let's Corridor page. The other one on the right hand side is just promoting couple with a counsellor. It didn't get that much of traction. Some more social media posts that we had. We tried to do about 2 social media posts, 2 to 3 every week, just to drive people there. And we really didn't plan to do so many, but we had to because of all the other campaigns that were running at the same time. More Facebook posts. The last one is actually just one of those campaigns that just show you that once you use humor, you get actually a lot of people engaging with it, reading it, and clicking through on the page, compared to even some of the other posts that were paid advertising. So some learning in there that we should probably do that more in the future as well. Instagram, just some of the posts that were sent on Instagram. We don't have a lot of followers on Insta, so we don't have the same engagement. It is actually for a younger target audience, and we're still trying to find our voice on that platform. So hopefully when we do the long-term plan proper, we will have a lot more to do. And if we can use more reels and videos and things, we can use Insta and TikTok a bit different. Just another post on on Insta. And then on Instagram, we also have the stories, which we also used, and we found that we actually did get a bit more engagement there. Also bear in mind, when we look at Instagram analytics, it's not the same as Facebook. They don't have that much in depth. So that's also why the engagement is a bit lower, or you don't get as much info from the analytics that you see there. But yes, we don't have a lot of followers there, but Instagram stories work better than the Instagram posts for us. LinkedIn LinkedIn is actually not really where the ratepayers go and look for information, but we've used it. It's more of a professional tool, not really a channel that's getting used by our ratepayers. But yes, we did use the channel as well. This time around, we used the MailChimp to create an electronic newsletter. If you look at actually, we've sent this newsletter from Mayor Bernie's desk, and also we sent it to the citizens panel. And as you can see, we actually had an open rate of 73%, which is very good. Yes, so I think that's something that we should also bear in mind next time when we communicate with people, and also which we found or thought of maybe in future is to get more people on the citizens panel, because there are people that are really engaging with us and would love to engage. I mean, they put up their hand to say that they would like to get involved and tell us what their views, share their views with us. Let's call it all, the summary there. As I said, not as much as I would actually want us to have to show, but if you compare it with some of the other Let's Call It All summaries, this is actually not bad. Also, it was not really a proper submissions, it was just engagement. And yes, I think compared to some of the other that runs for a full 4 weeks, we didn't do bad. I think it's actually good, but not a lot of surveys as we would have loved to have. And if you look at the traffic sources overview, a lot of the people that go to Let's Call It All page come from our Facebook page. So also just shows that the hard work they put in on socials and on Facebook do work in the end. We had a total visits of 1,200 and 111 people engaged with a tool, and therefore we can say about 931 people were aware of the long-term plan and 184 people were informed. So they probably looked at some of our FAQs, watched the video, read more, and those type of things. And I think if you also bear in mind that one of the key purposes of the engagement was also to make people aware of the long-term plan, and not only to, what it is, why is it important for them as well. Just to show how the Let's Call It All page worked compared to the hard copies. In total, we had 93 submissions, and 10 of them came in hard copies, and the rest were from the Let's Call It All page. Also, printed version, we only had one that were handed in. Community Connection 6, and I think we actually said we're going to give it a trial run this time and see if Community Connection is worth it to put the full survey out there. Just that's the numbers. And on Age on the Go, we actually did get 3 people who filled in the survey for us. Key takeouts, as I said, the citizen panel were highly engaged with 73% open rate, and we're definitely going to use that more, and we're going to do our best to start getting more people on the citizen panel before we do the long-term proper. And we need to improve, just saying what I just said, and we also found the slightly quirky, creative social media posts did get a lot more reach than the boring council looking tiles. Something to learn from. Interactive polls continue to be a good engagement tool for us, and Facebook remains our hero on the social media channels. Survey analysis. Just bear in mind this is a small survey, not a lot of people who participated, so that's not the whole Horowhenua that feels that way. It's just from the people that participated. So that's that in short. I've got all the slides of everything there. You can tell me if you want me to open it up, open for discussion, or should I just move on?
I think you can safely move on, Monia. I think the pre-reading had all those slides in there and were quite valuable.
Look, there's a lot.
Can I just ask one question? So, you know how we printed the survey in the Chronicle? Are you saying that only one person returned it?
Six people attended, yes.
Wow.
From the Community Connection, the printed one, yes. And remember, we also use the Community Connection, are also getting sent out with electronic mails and online, so it could also be that they probably filled it in there, but that's what the engagement was from the printed version.
I just had one question around how they were rating the waste collection, and in particular the continue to support council weekly curbside general rubbish collection, which effectively for us is the rubbish bag. Did they, because we didn't, it doesn't say rubbish bag, did they understand exactly what we meant by that? Because then furthermore there's also the Aura rates funded urban curbside wheelie bin rubbish collection, which would be a new and introduced thing. And sort of for, I guess, some of the feedback, they were rating those things quite high, which I didn't necessarily expect to see. And so I just want to understand whether there was the adequate understanding of bags, because in the market, bags, people go with the private collectors more than bags. We're a very small percentage of that collection, and so I struggled to believe that everyone that answered that actually is an existing bag person. So if they're doing bins and not bags, like, I don't know if the comprehension is there to support their preferences.
I think it's very difficult for me to answer that question because I'm not sure how each and everyone interpreted what they read there. We didn't receive any questions or from people asking specifically what it meant, so it's difficult for me to say if that answer was correctly interpreted by the people who filled in the survey.
I'll just add as well, we were relatively light touch for pre-engagement, but would really love to see some of the one of the presentations from MWLAS from our future leaders looked at youth engagement and how we might engage youth more effectively, and there's some really great learnings from that. So I think while we got some good feedback and relatively good engagement with pre-engagement, for us it's about trying to tap into that apathetic middle community and rangatahi that aren't necessarily engaging at all with council and try and get their views as well. So absolutely be looking to you in the new year to add to this with events and radio and all sorts, so that we can get out into the colleges and things and talk to them about their views on the long-term plan topics.
Just acknowledging it's a very limited sample at this stage, but there's a couple of things I want to test as we get deeper into the consultation. One thing is there was overwhelming support for the direction we're suggesting about getting the basics right and growth, a very strong support, but very mixed results in terms of climate change as a priority, very mixed results there, so I'll be keen to test that as we go further on and just understand where climate change sits as a priority in terms of our long-term plan, in terms of the public.
Yeah, I think when you look at the sample size of around 100 and our ratepayer and resident base, I wouldn't put 2 and 2 together and make 4 with that one. I think it's important that we delve a little deeper. Yeah.
Just following on from that, and at risk of being accused of being Trump-like, I did wonder whether, in one of the earlier slides we talked about climate change being a focus for this LTP, and that just didn't quite sit with my recollection of, like, I understood we had a conversation about the I won't call it a slush fund, what do we call it, a budget being allocated to do climate change things, but I'm just not quite sure where it's come from that it's going to be a focus of the LTP. So, and it might not, I know you might just be testing that, but keen if there's anyone around the table that wants to challenge me on that climate change is and should be a focus in terms of the LTP beyond the $100,000 slush fund.
I could clarify that bullet point. It was talking about the feedback asked about the LTP focus, which was the doing the basics well and being ready to seize opportunities. And then it was also asking about waste and recycling. It had a question about climate change and one about shared pathways. It wasn't intended to say that it was a focus. but it was a question. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't accuse you of being Donald Trump, because I think the feedback's quite considered in terms of giving us a very soft direction around where they would like us to focus and what they agree to, and in some cases not necessarily saying it's not important, but maybe it's not as a greater priority as what some other aspects of it are. So, I will point out that only 5 of the 100 responses in that space pointed out no investment into climate change. So, it's about the priority level, of a low number base.
Did anybody else have any comment or feedback on the feedback as we come to the close of this early engagement section of our workshop today? Great, thank you. Great. And with that, we are going to move into our SSPs section. So just make room for the others to come through.
Kia ora koutou, ko Charlie Strums Horowhenua. I haven't actually spoken before you before, so this is a new experience for me. I'm just going to do the first part of the this presentation about SSPs. And fortunately for me, the last few days I've actually been enjoying the beach at Ohope, and a lot has changed in that time. So Ash, who's been working on that change, will present the second half around the draft SSPs. So the purpose of this presentation is to share with you the process that we went through and what has been done to date, to share the draft SSPs and next steps. Why an SSP review? Well, we have different levels that we look at things intently, our vision and strategy, which is community outcomes, etc., the organisation performance report like OPR, annual report, etc., and then you can get down to the SSPs, which are around our milestones and our achievements and our performance journey, and that's the hierarchy of what we're looking at here in terms of SSPs. Another reason why we have SSPs and why we're doing it is because we're legislatively required to do SSPs. When we looked at the current SSPs that we got, a lot of them in the feedback that I've been finding over the last couple of years is they're not fit for purpose anymore, and they're not aligned to our community outcomes. They're quite output focused, and for some they're difficult and in fact impossible to measure, and some are not achievable and they've never ever been achievable and they never will be achievable. Some of them don't tell our performance story, which is I'll talk about in a minute, but when we engage with the auditors, that's what they strongly encouraged us to do, that the SSP should tell our performance story and our performance journey, and there are too many of them. The review does need to be done in conjunction with the long-term plan, so because they have to be consulted on with the community, so it's a natural place for that to fit in, and they should also reflect the new activity management plans, which are also done as part of the long-term plan. The last review was done 7 years ago, so it was definitely timely to do it. SSPs use a lot of resource in terms of the regular reporting and during the annual report audit process. They do take up a lot of that audit time as well. What we did, we first of all spent quite a bit of time reviewing and collating a variety of SSPs from other councils and then shared them with SSP's owners. Quite a substantial document, but really, really useful exercise to see what other councils have done, try and pick out their best ones and then amend it to us. We did review how many SSPs other councils have. That's not every single council. If we couldn't find it pretty quick and easy within a minute or two from the website, we didn't go any further than that. But the range is interesting, from 38 SSPs to 456. 456 is definitely an outlier. There was then a couple of councils in the 200s, a few in the 100s, I'd say maybe about 10-20%. Bulk were around 60 to 100, and then there was a few in the 50s, 40s, and one in the 30s. So the median was 72. So that kind of gave us a bit of a message. We have 109 currently, that we could reduce our numbers of SSPs and not be an outlier. While the auditors were on site during the annual report process, we met with the auditors to get some feedback, and we had strong feedback to change the SSPs to move to more of a narrative style SSP, and an SSP that tells a story. They shared Palmerston North City Council's SSPs were ones that they really liked, and if you have a look at Palmerston North ones, they've got some really good narrative SSPs that are also easier to provide evidence when going through the audit process, because they're not tied to specific figures that are an audit trail. We then met individually with SSP owners who are often the activity manager or those who are heavily involved with the SSPs. We reviewed the existing SSPs that they are. We discussed any issues with them. Where relevant, we, in the draft anyway, recommended amending or removing some SSPs, and then we drafted new SSPs. And that was all based on the new activity management plans and the prior experience of having to report on or work with those SSPs. SSP owners then went away and gained approval from their GMs, and then they presented them to you as part of their activity management plans. When we were thinking about the SSPs, we were taking these things into account. So the feedback from elected members has been multiple times over the time is that for them to be less output focused and more outcome focused. So that's what we were trying to get, more of a broader outcome base on some of those SSPs. Is the SSP mandatory? And you'll see coming up in the slides that Ash is going to do that the ones in red are, and we can't change those. But they are the only mandatory ones for the Department of Internal Affairs Three Waters ones and land transport. Some of the SSPs, there was a bit of confusion at the beginning, were for things that are mandatory, but it doesn't make the SSP mandatory. We don't have to have it. For example, the annual report is mandatory, but we don't have to have an SSP about it. So it's just making clear the SSPs that are in red that we are keeping are the ones that we can't change in any way. Is the SSP in relation to operational matters that can be reported on in other ways instead of through the SSP process? So the important thing to remember, if we recommended, we'll put in our draft that we remove some SSPs, it doesn't mean that that's not going to be done anymore, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to report on it anymore. We're just not going to report on it, or we're recommending not to report on it through the SSP format, but there's other ways they can be reported or potentially just managed internally. We thought about whether the SSP does tell our performance story, and that's what we were trying to aim for after that really strong feedback from the auditors. And also we wanted to make sure some of our existing SSPs are not smart, so that they are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and have a time factor to it. So I'll hand over to Ash. She's going to talk about where we ended up with the draft SSPs.
So in terms of where we've ended up, we sent out pre-reading materials that look like this, which you would have all received. In this content, the information that's in red is the mandatory. In front of you, we have put the new SSPs, or what we've are considering or would like you to consider as being the up-and-coming SSPs. On the screen is not the old versions as well, it's just the new one. We have had some feedback, so thank you to the elected members that have provided some feedback. And I have incorporated these into the slides, which will come up in green. So what you see initially is what you were sent, and then in green are the changes that have, or suggested changes that have come through. Outside of the feedback that was received from Councillor Jennings, some has been incorporated and some hasn't, just we haven't been able to get onto all of that, but happy to have a discussion after the meeting on another day to go through that feedback, and we can send another version of this back out to elected members following that.
Sorry, Ash, can I just ask a question around auditors' emphasis on mandatory SSPs? Do they actually, if we cut ours down to 10 instead of the 100, would it actually make much difference to the audit?
Yes, it's that balance. They do want it to tell a performance story. They do. They have released new standards for performance measures, and that does tell us that they still want to see and are interested beyond the mandatory ones, but they don't want irrelevant information coming into the SSPs. They want it to be more about the performance journey of the organisation. Yep, so I don't think they would be keen on just the 20
I'm just trying to save time, I suppose, in terms of, I know how many hours they're here, and it doesn't seem, if they're wasting time on irrelevant sort of SSPs, it seems a bit pointless.
A lot of their focus is on those mandatory ones. It has been, in my experience anyway, in the last couple of audits. It is those mandatory ones.
It's still important that we have others, but it's just ensuring that those others that we have in here are really telling our story and what we want to report on versus having just extensive numbers of SSPs because we can. It's ensuring that they are.
And I suppose
relevant.
One of my question, are we doing this for the auditors or are we doing it for the community? That's what I'm
and we should be doing it for the community to tell the story to the community.
Absolutely. Yeah. In a way that's easier for us to report on.
Yeah, but the feedback we got from Clinton, the auditors, was that this is what they use as their measurement tool, and so, the change in the annual report this year, where it was a lot more storytelling, the shift and the sharpening up of the SSPs to the stuff that we think matters and that we're wanting to show, is where we're putting focus or energy into performance. That's going to help tell that story in terms of future annual reports. But yeah, I think it is a part of this is doing it for the auditors so that they can have a measurement tool to. Yeah.
And I guess that the message from the auditors when we met with them was around ensuring, that we up our game in terms of the way that we do have our level of service and our performance measure and then what the target is. And so one of it, jumping many, many slides ahead, it is around once we get to a draft point, do we want to go back and meet with the auditors and get them to look over it again and say, what do you think, how have we done? And that's a question that we're going to ask you. What do you want us to do with that? Do you want us to go back and get Clint or his team to go back through and say, actually, we don't think you've hit the mark, or actually, this is great, like this is what we're expecting, because as you would have heard from Clint in your session, that no one does it amazing. We've heard Palmerston North do it okay, like they seem to be the outlier at the moment, but no one's great at this, and do we want to be, and do we want to go back and check and get that check done by audit, which is an option, but we will ask you that if that's what you want us to do.
Can we give you that signal now? Like, is there anyone around the table that objects to that? Because I think it's a challenge back to Clint and audit to say, well, you're telling us to lift our game. This is what we've gone away and done. Give us your feedback. Like, is this kind of meeting your expectations? So I think it's a really important step. So I totally support it.
Yeah, I don't want to sit around a audit briefing saying that some of our ECSPs missed the mark. So I think let's put the onus back on them to, here's our best effort at this point. Give us some feedback, and then we're avoiding getting that feedback at the back end of next year.
We're happy to take the direction off the table and go back if that's what you'd like us to do.
Sorry, just noting quickly that I think they'll probably look at the SSPs as part of their audit of the LTP anyway when they come in February, so that will be part of the work program that they'll do.
But we probably will try and touch base with them sooner, because we will include these in the consultation document. They do need to be consulted on, and the sooner we can make any amendments on that would be.
Yeah, my experience with any government agency, the more you can involve them in the decision making, the easier it is and later on relationships, I'm sure.
Yeah. So just for absolute clarity, they will be audited before you adopt the draft long-term plan. They will look at the SSPs with a fine-tooth comb. I think what I'm hearing is you'd like an early steer from audit about are we on the right track or not. Our intent was off the back of really helpful feedback from Sam and Pity and the work that's been done to date. We would take any further feedback from today, refine our work, and then we, in the, I forget what we call the report, Caro, the milestone report for the long-term plan, which we bring to you on the 13th of December, we were intending on having the updated draft of the SSPs to have you endorse those SSPs ahead of audit, reviewing them as part of their audit. And that's all about, remember, our intent this time for the LTP is that our community sees publicly kind of all those little decision-making processes before audit arrive at whenever it is in February. Cool. So what we have on the screen, I have had a session with Councillor Tukupoa around her feedback, and I have incorporated that into the slide, which just shows some different wording, and it was whether or not people around the table are comfortable with the changes or the suggested changes that have been made. As I said, the feedback from Councillor Jennings hasn't been included in this presentation, so it's whether or not you want us to go through this now, or we have a session with Councillor Jennings just to incorporate his feedback and then pass it back out, which may be more of a effective use of time to do it that way versus going back through the change. So when we started this process, councillors, you'll recall that some of you were very clear that there were others around the table that were more interested in SSPs than others. And obviously Pity and Sam put their hand up at that workshop and said that they definitely were keen to get into the detail, which they have. Really, it's probably do you want us to continue to go down that process whereby, we update the changes, we send it out, and those that want to get into the detail do, but the rest of you are happy to continue to endorse the general direction, or whether you want us to go through each SSP now, or you've delegated that to Pity and Sam.
The only thing I would like to probably do today, where there are substantive changes to the SSPs that were there before, wording changes, I'm comfortable with, some of the recommendations or alterations, but if there are substantive changes, then I don't think it would hurt to have a high level sort of, look at those, but also, thank Sam and Perry for actually the extent of their feedback. I'm probably pretty comfortable with, but would and look to see what comes out of following today. Yeah.
So if I can, just as an example, say for like this first one, my feedback. So the level of service I didn't change, that was the same. But I've suggested tweaked wording within that performance measure. Not by a lot, but if I read out the one provided was an increase in the number of local programs, grants, and activities that respond to my aspirations. But that one in green is.
So this also incorporates some feedback from Councillor Jennings, which talks about.
Oh, okay, so that's not all mine.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, but it was very similar to the feedback you
Between
had.
the two of us,
Yeah.
it's the middle ground.
Yeah.
So.
I guess there was some changes suggested around wording, targets and questions around targets, but there were also some previous SSPs that we previously reported on have been suggested to be put back into the mix as well, and so there are a few of those.
Oh, sorry.
Also conscious that, after a draft long-term plan consultation documents put out, that there may be changes to some of these SSPs because of
from feedback
and different things anyway. So, I don't want to get too far down into the hot rabbit hole of, going through word by word or anything like that at the moment.
I'm also really conscious that we've had these for weeks, and I've going to come last minute, and so there's only so much you can do with this information as well in terms of the feedback. So, like, there's nothing in there in particular in terms of the feedback I provided that I would have died in a ditch over. Like, it's just, there's some suggested refinements, but a number of these things could be, and it sounds like you've already weaved some of it in there, but none of this is, it can be either addressed, because there's obviously some things where there'll need to be a response or reaction by some of the group managers to some of the comments, but even if they're not taken forward at this point, there is still scope to change or add things later depending on feedback, right?
I think what's important is ensuring that we have a really good draft that we go out to the community. We don't want to go out to the community knowing that we want to already make changes in that final. So I think there's definitely the work is important to sit down and actually nail it to a good draft that we're comfortable with to go out to the community. Their group managers and activity managers have gone through some of your feedback and actually think it's really valid and really good points, and have said, look, actually, taking that on board, we do want to amend or add. So it's really, really useful information, and I would suggest if the table was comfortable, is that from here we can provide what they were and then have a session, another session with Councillor Jennings and to go and make sure we get a good draft and then flick it back out to elected members. If that.
Yeah, my only last comment was really, I was testing the new ones, doing away with the old, testing the new ones around what's the meaning, or what's the story, or what is it telling us? Why are we asking to measure this? Because it says this, or it means that to community, and does it make sense? Is it meaningful?
Yeah.
And if it didn't, then it's like, well, then you can adjust it to make sure that it does. That was kind of the lens I was applying to the few that I recommended some drafting. But again, it's open for all.
There were a couple of questions that Councillor Tukapoa asked me, and we do have the answers today. So if we wanted to just go through those, in particular around community. Also, there were some questions to the table around community development that came out, which was in particular around providing opportunities for community organisations and whether or not we wanted to reduce the dollars or increase the number from a performance. So there were some questions for the table that came out, and whether or not we can sustain funding the youth employment. But there was also some in the compliance, where I just wanted to ask Vi to just provide some
I guess, provide the answer to that. So there was a question around how is compliance reached. So I'm just, have asked Vi just to answer those questions.
Thanks, Ash. So the question around the dog control one there, how is compliance reached? So we're saying for dangerous and menacing dogs that where there's been a non-compliance, that the owner will reach compliance within 3 months. The question there about how do they reach compliance. That'll be variable depending on the non-compliance. If it's something like a newly registered menacing dog, then there'll be a whole list of requirements that they need, such as de-sexing their animal, fencing their property, being on a lead. There's a lot of things. But if it's in response to a dog that's already currently registered, for example, and they've been out wandering, then the compliance might be they need to fix their fence, or they need to sort out some suitable way of containing that dog on the property. So it might be a new kennel or whatever it is that animal control have determined is a requirement to reach compliance. The second one there around the premises, so this is for alcohol licensing, the percentage of high-risk alcohol premises that are visited at least twice a year. So the questionnaire around what is high risk. High risk is actually defined in the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act. So it says if you meet a whole lot of criteria, such as if they're open really late at night, if they operate more of a bar rather than a restaurant, there's a whole risk matrix within the Act itself that actually says it's high risk. So we're not just picking them, they're defined already. I just wanted to make a comment about the swimming pool one, bringing it back for 33%. There is a question there around where does that 33% come from in terms of the number of swimming pool barriers inspected. I actually suggested we make a change to that. The 33% was because when the swimming pool legislation originally changed, it said it needed to be done every 3 years. But it's 3 years from the anniversary date, which is either the CCC date or when it came over from the previous legislation or when it came to our attention. So they won't always be a third every year for every 3 years. And so that should be in accordance with the requirement of the Building Act instead. So the frequency. Kia ora.
Can I just ask a question on the swimming pool one? Because that was one I was going to put some feedback around, because it was like I probably care less about how many of the ones registered with us are being inspected, because I just think that's like a kind of a BAU thing. It was more around, and so I was going to provide feedback, but I didn't, around it's the ones that we don't know about that I probably care more about, and so should that be reflected as an SSP or not, like in terms of actually identifying ones that haven't been disclosed to us, and I'd err on the side of not including an SSP around that, because again it was a bit difficult to put a particular measure around it, but that's the kind of lens that I've looked at these through. Like, yeah, it's where we wanted to shift the dial, because actually what matters for us is identifying the more high risk ones that we don't know about than the ones we do know about. So yeah.
I totally agree with that. So look, there is the option for us to add something around that. Look, would it be challenging? Probably. And there are some other councils around Auckland, for example, that are using things like AI tools to go and try and identify pools that they don't have on their register. Requires a bit of work, but as Ash said, if we're going to sit down and actually flesh these out a little bit more, we can consider that.
So I guess wrapping this session up, if you're comfortable for us to go away and incorporate the feedback that we have received, touch base with both elected members to make sure that we're ensuring we're actually incorporating it to what you were initially getting across, and then sending something back out. How does that sound?
Really good.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. You're welcome to come back anytime. Okay.
And just noting that feedback, because the council agenda will go out next Thursday, which means that this work is ideally finished by today, but I think I've negotiated with Grayson and Alice till next Monday.
Go for it.
Right, fees and charges. You will record over the last month when we went through the activity presentations. Each activity would have presented some sort of indication for fee changes. So this slides here summarize all the proposed changes that we'll be presenting to you. So as an overview, we have used the local government cost index prepared by Business and Economic Research Limited. We call them BEL. That's commissioned by Taituara, and that's being used widely by councils around New Zealand. As a general rule, we will apply the indices, and anything that's an exception to that is presented in the slides. And so the manager's respective area will be talking through the proposed changes with you. There are also some minor wording adjustments that we have proposed to make, and that's just to make sure that it's clearer to understand for each fees and charges that we are charging. So areas that were reviewed included regulatory areas, community facilities, career experience and services. That's mainly for customer services printing costs to make sure that it aligns with other printing costs that we're charging. The Horowhenua to make sure that we align with the guidance from government, and also some of the fees in the community infrastructure areas. So the next 8 slides or so summarize the changes, and after that each manager will be presenting the proposed changes to you individually. So in the building area, there are some change to fee structure, resulting in some changes to the schedule. Also some wording changes, new fees being introduced. Resource planning, there's a new fee for development engineering time. Updated hourly change, no increase being proposed to admin costs and bond preparation and bond refunds. In the community facilities area, a couple of new fees, which Mark will talk to you about soon, and the commercial rates that was discussed earlier in the activity presentation. In the compliance area, Vi will talk to you about the material increases and all the changes that we're proposing for the animal and dog control area. And then some small changes in the printing cost to make sure it's consistent. Also the Horowhenua fees, consistent with the fees guidance. So, and then there's the infrastructure ones that Daniel will hopefully be able to talk to you about. I'm going to pass the control to Blair.
Can I just check, in terms of the public-private splits, and so we're talking private fees and charges, have any of these, so that fundamental percentages, any of that changed in the mix of this?
Yes, so some of them will be changed, and so that's the options that the managers will be presenting to you. When we are doing the fees review, those private and public splits are being considered as well. So any changes to that will be included and presented.
Well, why aren't we starting there sometimes, like determining how much should fall on the ratepayer and how much should fall on the individual in a particular activity before you start shifting things around? Like we have an existing policy, I just want to see what the implications of change are in some of that.
So they are all in there in the slides with whether it's compliant or not. So maybe if you'd like, we can flick to that part of the slide first.
Hard to read, so I think last time we came to the table we had a much more succinct summary. There's quite a bit of detail further on from this, but in the planning and building space, essentially like I said last time, we built from a zero base up, then established a baseline for providing the service at a sort of long run average base in the consenting space, determined what those costs were, and then looked at the fee structure to enable those costs to be covered appropriately. What happened is that left us with quite a high fee going straight out if it was all going sort of private. So then what we did is we adjusted the public-private split to bring that back into a palatable space in terms of a reasonable fee position, largely around the hourly rate, but also in terms of the public-private split. So ours have shifted quite a bit, but they are connected. So I think if I understand what you're saying, Peter, we sort of did work to that space where we looked at what the cost of the activity was, what we needed to recover to cover the activity, and then looked at the public-private split to make that reasonable in the market and in the...
Well, I guess because the public-private split is a policy setting, right? It's what essentially should drive the implementation or how those things unfold. And I feel like we're going around the other way without having that conversation first about the appetite to move based on, sound rationale and where we think the community can stomach some of those things.
I guess I just mentioned probably in terms of the conversation today, we'll show you where there isn't compliance, but the working up of the options to either need to change fees or to propose a specific change in terms of the policy to you isn't fully worked up yet. We're hoping over the next 2 workshops that will be ready. So the purpose of today was to signal where fees might need to change. You're completely right, Councillor Tukapor, in terms of going from the policy setting first. But the intention of today was to make sure, in terms of the budget conversation that you're having today, where does that current budget look in terms of a compliance angle, and what work do we still need to do in terms of the conversation to either increase fees to make sure we are meeting our compliance, or come in and have a different conversation with you about where we think that mix. The intention of it was that there wasn't going to be a significant change in terms of policy if we could make it work. There's a couple of areas, trade waste, for example, is one where we, as part of the conversations, we might look to have a slightly different conversation, but there wasn't a wide-scale intention that we looked at changing some of those, because we did do some of that work last time. Vi might have a bit of a conversation about her areas, but particularly in terms of the building and regulatory space, the full workup hasn't been done yet to propose that mix.
So, sorry. So a lot of the stuff in the detail level, but really comes through from, there's a number of pages, but a lot of the stuff comes through from the changes that have been made to the rate, which has been sort of based around a public-private split hypothetical. We can work up the alternative as well as to what it would look like with the current public-private split. But it was quite out there, because even comparatively with other councils, and some of our resource consent and recoveries were almost opposite to most other councils in terms of how the splits sit. So we've really tried to bring it back in line and make sure our recoveries are at the right level. So these are, a lot of this is just a combination of contributing pieces that come together to come up with a fee structure, which is things like the hourly rate, number of inspections, different sorts of things in each of these that come to form a base rate.
So probably in terms of the conversation today, we talked a little bit about, should we leave elected members with this presentation as a key information source, highlighting where we've got some compliance issues, and then come back in the next workshop with a more detailed conversation about any potential change. But we thought it was important that each manager had an opportunity to highlight some of the areas where there was some significant change or some policy that might need to be looked at, so that you had a signal early before you went and reviewed the detailed information.
So again, a lot of the changes really in the hourly rate primarily, and they are sort of double digit, but like I say, comparatively to sort of adjacent districts and around, it's a sort of mid-range rate. And yeah, obviously we do have a bit of a differential in our current position. We're a little bit behind, and this probably indicates some of that as well. So trying to bring those rates up has had an impact on the public-private split. So certainly happy to have that discussion. We just which one comes first, I guess. Resource consenting is, I say, was sort of set at 70-30 and gone 30-70. I think. I remember, I can't read that myself from here, but it's pretty much flipped around in terms of what it was previously. But again, that, like I say, that lines up with other council jurisdictions more closely, and our rates are more reasonable too, just given sometimes the cost of external contractors to do some of the work that we can't otherwise do. And I know there has been a bit, I mean, I wasn't here previously, but there has been a bit of move in the past where, we've had some sort of bumpy years where our cost bases remain the same, timeframes have probably gone out extensively, and then we've had a whole surplus of additional revenue from some of those bumpy years. And then I think maybe, don't know, wasn't here, but maybe the public privates have changed at that time to reflect some of that. But I think the reality is we haven't really been in balance with demand in terms of our cost structure, so that's what we're trying to do in this space, is get in balance with our demand and then be able to adapt to our demand as well, so we can retain the time frames.
Blair, the part of your work at the moment is to build the data system, so we collect the data so that we can work out where we're spending our time, because particularly in this space, there's that time that's being spent on people that there's no way to collect money because it's a general inquiry. And so at the moment we haven't really got an information base to suggest that the 60 to 70%, but that the split is wrong, right? Like we haven't got the evidence base to suggest that it's wrong or it's right in terms of how we're allocating the costs of this activity over how we're actually spending our time, because we don't know exactly how we're spending our time. Is that fair?
Not in absolute, fair. Not in absolute terms. We don't have that view. We've made some assumptions around. A lot of that comes down to labour effectiveness or charge out rates, essentially. So we've made some assumptions in there to get to here. Probably lowballed, real to be fair. So. But that's the other piece I talk about. Once we improve efficiency, we'll get a better outcome in the space. So we can always move back at a later date as well. It's not so this is fixed and stays. This is really just to help us in the short term until we can get to that improved efficiency space.
I know it's not a key driver, but have you, in this preliminary work, Blair, looked at neighbouring authorities and how these sit alongside those? Because that's often an important consideration when we make the final decision.
Yeah, like I said, much better aligned. So in terms of the rates that you see there are much more conducive with what you see elsewhere, and also the percentages. So some of our percentages previously were quite almost opposed, opposite, and the rates have been quite low. So I think in resource consent planning at sort of $170-$80, we're not necessarily even recovering some of our most expensive consultants. So we sort of run a deficit. I sort of talk about margins and things. It's probably more commercial world, but I'm sort of quite keen on what we're doing at the margin. Because we need to obviously cover our costs and then cover our overheads and then cover our activity. And then a lot of that for us is driven around demand, because our only income is demand. So if no one wants a building consent, then we have no income. So as demand fluctuates, that determines how much we're earning and offsetting against cost. So we're trying to balance those, so rides together, if that makes sense, and give us the ability to fluctuate. But if our cost base is here and our demand is up here, then you'll see, like you saw 2 years ago, a whole bunch of margin per se. That was probably, I'm guessing, offset at the time of the change in the public-private to 90-10 or something for building. So compensate for that. But the reality is, once demand shifted, we're now here, so we're now running below cost base. I mean, we've taken out, like I said the other day, probably 30-40% of our cost base in real terms since I started, but we're still lagging. So we need to correct that with a more reasonable fee structure and a more reasonable public-private split, which, like I say, and to your point, is much more aligned to those around us in adjacent councils.
We did. I was just going to make the point. We did cover off, obviously, a lot of the policy-based decision-making around these activities when we did the AMPs. But this obviously gives you a feel for, well, what does that mean in terms of actual dollars?
And Blair, I noticed a number of them are actually below the rate of inflation at the moment. Is that just, their bill numbers, are they? Yeah. Right, okay.
Use the microphone, Blair. Blair, use the microphone.
Yeah, so I was just saying, I guess in my thinking, not necessarily just straight up and down financial year, but yeah, I mean, we're sort of sitting around 19%, which in line with sort of proposed rates increases is not wildly out of the park, I guess, in terms of a fit. But that's the revenue side, so we're sort of adjusting the revenue side to catch up. And it's not wildly out of whack, so yeah, there are some shifts there, but I don't think it's unreasonable. And to get to that not unreasonable place at a market rate perspective, we had to make those adjustments to the public-private split. We can certainly picture it, map it up for you with the old public-private splits, but you'll see that the rates per hour are $400 or something, $350, something like that, which will create some noise.
So as part of the next two workshops, those options around what would it look like to be compliant, or what does it look like to stay where we are, and the two different options in terms of revenue and fees, that'll be part of your next part of the conversations in terms of, are we happy with the current split and what does it mean for fees, or do we want to look to change it because there's been a change in terms of the volumes of consents that are coming in?
I'm just thinking, for the purposes of this workshop, should we or could we, rather than go through the tables with the numbers, I wonder if we should, because you guys are going to give this to us to go away and do some homework, I wonder if you could, each person, each manager could just give us the headlines on what you want us to focus on, when we take the information away, we can take some notes, and so that we can then focus our energy on giving you the feedback you need. Yeah. I don't know if others agree on that.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
Councillor Jennings, perfect. That's something I've prepared earlier for you. Just to read your mind. Let's start on aquatics, because I am mindful of time as well. I have added down the bottom there some conversation starters, I guess, that I'd love the table to give us a bit of a direction on. Essentially looking at our aquatic space. So this is based off some conversations we've had during the workshop stages, and particularly you'll remember I was first off the bat straight after your financial strategy conversation with Jacinta, and we had a bit of conversation around fees and charges, revenue, what that looks like. So just down the bottom there, we'll start with the table, sorry, just quickly, very high overview, you'll see that we've got a spa pool charge that we're looking at implementing for Foxton Pool. And you'll see that we're looking at aligning the entry prices with Levin Aquatic Centre, so it's consistent across the district. For councillors today, just to let you know that we are still working at looking at that membership rates and cards. That was a discussion in the first workshop around what does a membership look like in our facilities. That's something we're working on in the background, so we'll bring that back in the final fees and charges. There was a conversation around Learn to Swim, and there was a mixed review around the table at the time. I'm just kind of putting it there. We are, and I've got some figures if you want them, but I can send them to you around where we sit across the region with our Learn to Swim pricing. There is an opportunity to increase that slightly, and I've put an idea around 50 cents a lesson. Now that is $10,000 per annum, so it's not a massive figure. But to give you an idea, we are lower around the region in terms of our swim school pricing. The next one, so I'm keen to know if there's an appetite to look at that. General entry pricing is sitting between 2.86% and 4%. These will be rounded off for the benefit of cash handling. Is there a desire to increase this? Again, we're on the lower end across the region in terms of our general entry pricing. We've just applied our standard increase, but if there is an appetite for that, we could look at that. And similar with our aquasize pricing compared to neighbouring classes, our pricing is lesser. Again, is there a desire to increase this? So, Councillor Jennings, I'm picking up off your point. We can talk about it now, but I'm more than happy to leave that on the table and get feedback. I don't know, Bernie, how you want to...
I think it would be quite interesting to get some reaction from those sorts of things. Straight away would be helpful.
I'm not sure what the current government's where they're at with learning to swim, their policies, but I know that subsidies were provided to Auckland so that all of South Auckland pools could be free. The driver really was that they had high numbers of drowning amongst the Pacifica community, and given that they're now more focused on a needs, well, at least I know that needs rather than ethnicity, there's obviously higher than national rates of population for Māori and Pacifica here, and there potentially could be some subsidy that would help with number 2. If you look into it, I don't know.
My quick reaction to these, Mark, I'm more than comfortable with the, your first 3. The family one is the only one that I might consider changing, and rather than maybe, I would, if you could, leave the price at $15, but maybe reduce the number. So instead of 5, it was 4. And that might make a difference, type of thing. I don't know. That we're trying to encourage family activity, and I think that would be better to somehow manage or massage that a bit better. That's all.
If there's no other questions, I'll keep moving. Libraries, I won't go into full detail on these. Oh, sorry.
One, just about the membership stuff. Would you envisage that being a membership card that went across both facilities? Could be used at Foxton or Levin by choice of user?
Yeah, I think we can look at that as an option, and I don't know if there's a price variance there or anything like that, but yeah, we're currently investigating what other places do and what our terms and conditions can be with such a system. So I can't see anything against that.
Basically, you're trying to find an option that suits people like me who would pay for a gym membership and go twice a year, and but pay the big upfront cost, and sweet.
I believe Splash Planet and the Hawke's Bay have a ratepayers card that allows them to use that place at less of a rate than everyone else visitors.
And for me, who would buy a membership to go 10 times and lose it after visit 6 and have to rebuy another 10. So, yeah, I'm liking that idea.
Very good. Libraries. So, there's no significant massive changes here in terms of dollar figures. We're looking at including a new fiction. It's a trial for a year. That's that third one down. That's consistent across what other libraries are doing. It gives people premium access. It's something that the libraries team have recommended, so that would be one idea. The magazines, simply around the expense of magazines, and we haven't increased the price for a number of years. And then bestseller. Again, that's a trial, having a collection of popular books available on demand for 1 week rental. Oh, sorry. Minor changes there. I learnt this week that we have a telescope in the library that you can rent out. So it was my learning for the week. But then also just, again, some slight changes, proposed rounding up, so nothing significant there. Printing and copying and book covering, increase in price, being competitive service, rounding up, again, nothing significant. Merchandise, this is, again, no significant changes. We're talking 20 cents. There is a new charge in there for a heritage calendar in collaboration with our partners in the Horowhenua Historical Society, along with some heritage postcards, small amount of revenue opportunity there. And I just wanted to end with a conversation. I know that, again, we had this in the first workshop was around our meeting rooms and function facilities. This is around commercial rates. I'm not talking about community rates on this slide. We're investigating a 15% increase, and I wanted to show in monetary terms what that looks like. So the Remu room, which most of you will be familiar with over at Te Takere Tango Kurahaupō, one of our more popular rooms, the current rate's $38. At the moment, in our proposed fee schedule, we're looking at $39. If I apply a 15% increase, we're looking at $44. Now, that's still very cost effective when we look across other meeting facilities across the district. And what I've put there at the bottom line, the current proposed increase is 2.63 to 4.55. So percentage wise, it looks like a large jump from a monetary figure. But from a commercial perspective, we know that people pay that. And that comes back to my point that I made in the initial workshop, which was, in our opinion, we provide quite a high level of service in our meeting facilities and bookings. And so we think that's fair and reasonable for our commercial customers. So again, just wanted to get a bit of a steer, because the first workshop was I got a nod from the table to look at moving forward with that. Just wanted to confirm that.
Should it be more? Yeah. My initial reaction was it should be more. Yeah, definitely. At least round it up to 45. I'll go 50.
Yeah, that's fine. That's why I wanted to put it on the screen, because I wanted to give you an idea of what it looked like.
How often, based on track record, do people book a whole day? So if that's the hourly, how many are booking the whole day?
More and more, we're getting bookings and booking out the whole day. So trainings is a really good example. So if we've got a training course provider that wants to book our facility for the whole day, and remember the Remu is only one room. If you connect the Remu with Totara, that's another booking together, and we have that whole room booked out. So Electra, for example, will book a whole day. So again, it's still cost effective for those large organisations.
Can we have daily rates then, rather than sort of hourly rates for someone?
So we do have daily rates. I've given you an hourly rate concept there, but we absolutely have a daily rate.
Kia ora anō. So compliance, it's a shame you can't see that screen really well, but this is all of the areas of compliance missing the resource RMA compliance one that was previously in Blair's one that you saw in green. Just so that we understand what we're looking at, the green means that we are recovering more than what we should, red less than, the white, and we've got a few areas there in white in that yellow column, are where we're currently meeting the funding policy. So looking across the compliance functions, for the first year of the LTP, we're looking at compliance or recovering more than for everything other than dogs. So the only one that's in red is dog control.
Sorry, just very quickly, it is on your portal now as well, if it's the whole presentation, if it's easier for you to look at the screen so that you can see the detail, just to let you know.
Cool. So the question around this is, so we've got the revenue and financing policy about meeting compliance to recover from fees and charges the amount that we've said to recover from fees and charges and the rates component. What we're saying in this here is that we're actually, with the increase in fees and charges and the changes that we're proposing, we're actually looking to make a little bit more than, so over 100% in some of those green areas, or flicking over into more than what we've said we're going to in the revenue and financing policy.
So I'm going to, so the question there is, if we were to make changes to the revenue and financing policy to allow us to make an income on some of these functions, would we want to? Or the reverse of that is we reduce or look to make some changes to fall within compliance. Just going to flick through that. There's a whole range of changes as part of the compliance strategy and the adoption implementation.
Sorry, since the dog control's in red, can you just describe the driver that's causing that?
I've got a slide later on. Do you want me to quickly jump to that one now? Okay, cool. Awesome. So just making mention there in the correlation with the change where we've chosen to put in more fees and charges or increase the fees and charges with the compliance strategy. So we're asked to put in there around the recovery of the costs associated with compliance. So that has been a driver for a lot of the areas where we are now seeking to recover more money than what is in the revenue and financing policy by the introduction of fees to be associated with non-compliance. So there's a range of different fees there that you'll see as you go through. Health licensing, we did a whole lot of work around the LTPA. We're not looking to change that, still falls within compliance, so we'll leave those fees as they are. Parking, as part of the previous workshops, there was some discussion there around the parking policy, looking at having a parking policy or strategy first before looking at making changes across that. So we've chosen to keep it there, understanding there will be some conversations around potential packages for what that could look like if we were to increase it in terms of reducing the rates and packages.
Just for interest, when was the last time we increased parking? Because I can't recall since we've had it ever being done, to be honest. It's some years, isn't it? Yeah.
Last year, I increased it by 10 cents.
Last year?
Yeah, just 10 cents though. So
we went from 90 to $1.
We went from $1 to $1.10.
There's $1.10 now. How did that get through?
You approved it.
Did I? Did my $2 an hour not get through?
Yeah, and obviously in our a couple of weeks ago when we went through the compliance activity, you gave us direction that that wasn't something that right now that you wanted to look at, but a little bit later on when we take you through some options around funding and financing, we'll pick this parking conversation up again.
Well, I'm interested in increasing that, so when did you say we're having that conversation?
When we take you through the rating packages.
Yeah, because you said we made a decision last week.
No, in the so when we went through all the activity management plans and we went through the compliance activity,
you got no allergic reaction.
No, the direction from council was to not review parking fines.
Oh, fines?
Well, not fines. The money meter stuff. That was the direction of the table.
Oh, well, did I show a hand or what? I somehow I've missed that and I disagree.
So the rationale, as I understood it, my recollection was that there were two key pieces to the puzzle, which was parking policy strategy and also as part of the town centre work stream, identifying those areas that might be subject to a new fee. So it was a work in progress.
Well, here's the thing. When we go out to the community and we show them potentially what the rates increase will be, we seriously need to look at other sources or other revenue streams so that doesn't push up as much as it's looking like. And we don't have many options, and this is one. And I agree with me, but $1 to $2, God, do it. Like, why are we, he thought we did that last year, but we didn't. So, I want to revisit. I'm sorry, I don't accept the whatever. And when the public sees, they'll understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, so you'll see an option this afternoon, which is to double the parking fees, and we'll be asking council to give us guidance on that because we think it's an option that you should consider.
Cool. You'll see that there is a whole lot of proposed fees to change, and they increase a lot higher than the bill. And that's because, again, we're looking to recover the cost to deliver the service from the person who is using it. So this is where there is non-compliance, recovering it from the non-compliant party. Cool. That's just the same. So now getting to the dog control conversation. Councillor Tukua. So this here, at the moment, what we saw before in terms of compliance with the revenue and financing policy, that was applying bill only for the change, and so we were non-compliant. This here shows to achieve compliance, what we'd be looking at in terms of a 30% increase in dog registration fees, what that looks like in money amounts. To answer your question around what is driving that change, so other than the rate of inflation, what we did as part of the LTPA process, if you'll recall, is we made a couple of changes. One change is that we increased the amount of money that we wanted to recover from the dog owner to reduce the burden on the ratepayer. The second thing we did, to be sure that we were charging the right amount and we were recovering the right amount, is that for these activities, dog control and animal control, they share staff. So what we did is an exercise around ensuring that the amount that we are recovering for the cost of those staff or internal overheads is correctly distributed to the amount of time they spent in each one of those spaces. And animal control, so what happened as part of that is that dog control, which was previously being charged around about 70% of the dog control officer's time, is now being charged at 85%. So that's what's driving that up. It's looking at around about 240k that drives that up. So the question here is then, to achieve compliance with the revenue and financing policy would require a 30% increase on dog registration fees on top of what was during the LTPA, an 18% increase in dog registration fees as well. So then there's the question around the balance between affordability and the ability to pay, because what we will likely see by driving up the dog registration fees, particularly in the entire dog fee code, is then a direct correlation with the number of dogs that are unregistered at the end of the period. Cool. The other fees and charges we've looked to, for these ones here, they are things that you buy, so collars, we haven't increased those significantly. For the others, we've looked at adopting around about a 30% increase for impound fees as well, so that's consistent across the board. Again, what we could see with that is if we impound a dog, we drive up those costs to get the dog back out, that we end up assuming that cost because the dog doesn't get collected. So those are considerations. Range fees. We've increased the application fees. Again, that's
Can I just check, is that cost neutral, like the what it costs to house that dog and feed that dog during any given period? Do those fees, those ones there, are they sufficient and cover those costs? Even with that increase, is that enough?
Yes and no. So yes, in terms of, is it enough to recover the cost of picking up the dog? So the actual cost around doing it, not looking at the hourly rate, but the actual cost for time. Yes. The actual cost for feeding, yes. But then if that dog doesn't get picked up, no. Because we don't see any of those costs. They don't come in.
How long do we, it's sad, but how long do we hold a dog and then the owner's not coming back for it? Then how much longer do we rehome the other?
So typically for unclaimed dogs, the Dog Control Act says we have to keep it for 7 days. So there are those for 7 days. You'll recall that there are some dogs that we've got there long term at the moment. They've been in there for over 6 months. The likelihood of recovering the costs for those being in there, next to nothing. Sorry, just to pick up your question around rehoming as well. We do have
good relationship with the SPCA, who share obviously a plot of land with us, and other agencies such as HOHA, PAWS, who do assist us as well. But what they are seeing, just as we are seeing, is that they're inundated with the number of dogs that they are asked to rehome as well. So there are a number that we're left to manage ourselves. These fees look similar, nothing really to say there. Customer experience and services, that's me as well. So just updating those finance did some work for us to show that we should be consistent with our other facilities as well. So those changes there are to make sure that we're aligned. It's me.
Oh, that's on my mind. Like, it's so we've had these particular dogs for 6 months. When the owner doesn't come back, that cost, it falls on the ratepayer because we're the ones left standing. And there is the challenge of, that situation. And then you say the Act says we have to hold it for 7 days, but we've held it for 6 months, not even 6 weeks. So do we need to draw a line in the sand to say, well, this is what we have to do, but we'll go a bit longer, and this is our cut-off point, and if we can't find a resolution, or because otherwise you just continue to rack up a whole lot of money that, unless ratepayers want to keep paying, well, tell us.
So this here is an example of where it's that balance between public safety versus the dog control activity and responsibility for dog owners. These dogs that are in there at the moment are actually pending prosecution, so we'll keep them until the outcome of the prosecution, and then the costs that get awarded as part of that prosecution will be what we can recover. So it's dictated for us.
The next one's very quick, but in terms of Lagoima, it's just to make sure that we're in line with legislation. So that's the only change from the org performance side of things.
Good afternoon. Not seeking significant feedback today, but I just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of areas. In some ways, there has been some changes in land transport, so we'll jump into that in a little bit more detail. But the green line on the top is signalling an over recovery. If we jump down into the solid waste area, the effectively some of the conversation later this afternoon, and also the position that we reached through engagement with our community in the long-term plan, subsequent proposals that will come to council around the potential for bag usage will almost reset and rebalance some of this work in that area. So I'll talk to what has changed in that space, and we did a lot of work through the long-term plan amendment, but not seeking particular feedback on that today. And then in terms of wastewater, there was a significant reset of rates through the long-term plan amendment, so significant changes that we are in the process of implementing. We are also in the process of recruiting a dedicated wastewater services manager, similarly to the water activity that we have, that would look after all things wastewater and the trade waste activity. So when we start to look at trade waste in more detail and implement the current funding arrangements, we will also be looking to extract additional revenue out of that activity. So there's an assumption of 200k in the 24-25 financial year onwards, and there's an employee that's associated with that to undertake that activity, but it's likely that it wouldn't just be a matter of jacking up fees on existing customers. We'd also be looking to broaden that customer base by working alongside smaller contributors, local businesses that contribute to that trade waste system. So it's a more holistic approach around the trade waste activity. Similarly, in the water supply, you'll see a whole line of reds there. You'll hear a little bit more about that when we come to you on the 13th of December, seeking approval around implementation of the water metering rollout, and that as part of the 24-25 financial year, we would also be looking to do a full review of fees and charges around that water supply. So the premise for the decision on the 13th of December is that we would accelerate the rollout of water meters under the guise of the existing rating and charging system. So we'll end up with a larger customer base, but there's a remissions policy around that. So
yeah, so just on that, because I was going to raise that about remission versus amnesty, because there's the remission is only 50% of excessive water charges at the moment, and so as we install water meters, inevitably we're going to find properties where there is leaks, and I would want us to ensure that the policy settings provide a period of time that enables that property owner to fix it without having to go through the remissions process, but that there's kind of like a very short amnesty where we're going, okay, well, actually the more important outcome is that you've fixed the leak and we're not wasting water and that we've solved the problem, rather than stinging people as we roll out the water meters. And I know that there has to be a point where that ends and then they're subject to the normal requirements, but that's going to be really important, and so I don't know how that factors into what's coming, but yeah, I'm really keen for that design principle to be part of the initial settings.
yeah, so of our 13,585 currently connected sites, we've got 5,300 already connected and metered. So there's a current regime. We'll talk to that a little bit more when we come to that decision around water meters and how that's managed, and we'll come armed with the facts around the current remissions policy and how that could be implemented in a way that won't lead us to having significant customer complaints about immediate leaks. So there is an opportunity to manage that. But that doesn't help the conversation today that we're currently in the red. Remissions or not charging would push us further and darken that red, not push us back towards the green. So what we're signalling here is that there's a decision around rollout of water meters that have been made through the long-term plan amendment. There's a commitment from council and the community to conserve water. But what we're going to talk about is how, once those are implemented, the dynamic to ensure that we meet our assumptions around recovery of those costs by the private customer. So there's a rebalance of that will be done alongside the implementation of the water metering, not in advance of the water metering proposal. So just like general increases across the board for staff time, the wastewater space. Obviously, we've talked to the increases that have been put in place and proposed into trade waste. That as part of the long-term plan, it's a more general approach to not increase this time around, because we've just increased the fees as part of long-term plan amendment, and we need to actually focus on implementation of that fee charge and extending that customer base to ensure that we're picking up all customers that are contributing to that.
Can you go back one slide? Yeah, so that rate per cubic metre, is that the going rate as per our neighbours, 45?
I will just need to check, and I can come back with clarification on that. The team had done a first principles type markup and some research on local market, and that was how we settled on that figure. They were quite comfortable with that, but I can come back with the detail. So there was some thinking in that went into.
It's a little bit like solid waste, yeah. You'll go and dump where it's cheaper. So if we were the cheapest, potentially make use of that, which overloads us or takes us to a capacity point sooner than others.
Yeah.
And I just, let's be mindful that we don't just want to be competitive and otherwise by default there's other implications that I'd like to understand. So I'd like to see the actual figures of what others are charging in the neighbourhood and region.
Yep, we can cover that, no problem. Water supply, once again, we've spoken to that in terms of that process around, part of that reason is that we've got half our network, a third of our network metered. There's a process to roll out. There's going to be a whole rebalance of that rate to make sure we hit the right level of recovery. Similarly, in solid waste, there's some general ups and downs, but there's a whole lot of other levers at play, be it the costs that make up and are causing that lack of recovery, or the private split in the landfill area, and that we're going to go through and rebalance that, and we can come back once those decisions of council are made. Roading, quite significant increases here, so we are already in the green, but the team have undertaken a process to review under the principle of true cost for service and recovery. So we are seeing some quite significant increases there, but really, not seeking particular feedback on that today, because they have been worked up on a first principle basis based on analysis of a good 5 odd years of delivery of these services, and knowing the cost involved and the requirements when we need to go out and do inspections. So we're trying to reflect the true cost of providing that service to the sector, and there are some quite significant increases to that effect.
It would be interesting to know, though, Daniel, how often these are applied. I mean, there's some massive increases in there, but if it means, are we applying these costs 10 times a year, 50 times a year? Does it actually make a difference to the overall revenue?
I can get the team to add a column around historic charging, and then we can bring that back. We can share that in a subsequent package that comes out to elected members. And similarly, without wanting to jump into the detail, there's actually quite a significant national review off the back of an incident that happened up in the Bay of Plenty. So there's quite a major rethink around the road safety traffic management plan process. And I currently sit on the National Road Safety Action Group, and there's a full review of that, and there could be implications in terms of for smaller and larger suppliers in that traffic management space. But happy to come back and share some of the detail around that.
Speaking of TMPs, what is the WAP? Is that and could you explain that 138% increase?
So basically, the team have worked up on an experience in terms of those work access or traffic management plans, what's actually required in general terms. So they often find themselves getting dragged into firstly assessing a plan, and the plan may or may, depending on who's presented it may or may not be fit for purpose. So you might be able to do a Google drive over and go, it's a simple job, let's approve it, but more often than not, there could be some a site visit involved, and then there's obviously work undertaken to oversee that process. So I haven't got that full breakdown here in front of me. I've relied on the team that they're experienced in the space. They've been doing this role for some time, and their assessment that they've made is that if we are in a process of trying to recover costs and rather than basically we've got almost a full-time role that manages that car system and is getting out and managing our contractors and those works that are undertaken. So we're trying to reflect that true cost of service in the rates.
An example I could give is that so someone's constructing a new driveway. As part of that, they need to get a traffic management plan, or they need to get a car in order to be able to do that work. If they don't get the car, and then we have to react because people complain, the team then have to go on site, and there's a whole lot of additional work the team have to do. At the moment, there is no fee structure to allow for that. They would just pay the same price as the person next door to them who had applied for the car. So it's almost kind of it's incentivizing people to follow the rules and actually do what they have to what they're supposed to do rather than us being in a reactive position.
Yeah, good to highlight that. Thank you. And back over to Caro.
Right. Thank you. So there's been a lot of discussion as we've gone through, but as we come to the end of the fees and charges section, is there anything else that you would like to see or to raise before we come to the close of this workshop?
Just a comment, really. Given that we didn't see this or the tables or even the hard to read initially red and green, and we went through it pretty fast, I'm struggled to answer that with all confidence. So what I'll say is, yeah, roughly agree with, but there's things like the parking I raised before and a few other things that I'd want more information about before I would adopt something like this. So it's just not finished.
And I think what we can undertake to do is, obviously you've got the presentation now, but I think if we at the end of this week circulate the actual schedule, which is like we've obviously chopped the schedule up to put into a PowerPoint presentation. We've obviously noted the questions that have come today. We can respond to them, but essentially put it back on elected members and say, okay, well, once you've got the answers to those questions in the schedules, if there's additional work or additional questions you've got, let us know by middle of next week so that we can make sure we capture that in the work ahead of the 13th.
Sorry, Vi's gone, has she? I was just going to ask about the dog fees. Is she actually proposing that they go to that 80-20 user thing or not? So she's proposing to put $80 to $104 in one fell swoop.
That's based on the policies we've seen.
Right. Okay. I'll provide some feedback.
And remembering that when we don't put up our fees to meet our revenue and financing policy guidelines, we then put up rates instead.
Thank you. So in terms of what we've heard, we'll follow that approach for taking your further feedback about fees and charges. Update the schedule based on what we've heard as well and provide that to you. And then about SSPs, taking your feedback on board as well about engaging early with audit about the SSPs to get the early steer, and that elected members will provide additional input and will work with you to work those SSPs up, share them again, and then intending to bring them to you on the 13th of December as part of the milestone report for endorsement. So, heading towards the 13th of December, we have the workshops today, the 6th and the 13th, to really inform the discussions about finances and about the issues to consult on. So by the 13th of December, we are looking for a clear direction from you about the issues that we'll be consulting on. Noted a few down there about, rates increase, any new or changed rates, options for curbside recycling, options for landfill funding. Yes, refining them on the 6th and the 13th. In these workshops, we'll also be bringing back to you the full list of significant forecasting assumptions. We've got the bill indicators, so can bring the financial ones to you. the draft significance and engagement policy, draft infrastructure strategy, and as mentioned, the SSPs. And then the milestone report will be coming to you on the 13th as well. Sorry, my formatting got funny on that slide up there, but the waste assessment will be included in material that you see at that council meeting.
Sorry, Karen. You're right. Workshop on the same day as council.
Yes.
But when's that scheduled for? Before or after the council meeting?
Probably before the council meeting. So we, it all really depends on how far we get with council this afternoon.
Just noting that there's a community wellbeing committee that day as well.
Yeah, so the intention is that the council meeting is unlikely to start until 4 p.m.
Oh, okay.
Because the council workshop will start at 1 p.m.
Right.
With the view that, and it might be we don't need the council workshop because it might be that today and next week, the guidance that you give us around the budgets and the funding packages give us enough information to inform that council paper for the 13th. It's, this is kind of part of the iterative process of building an LTP that it's a little bit we don't quite know yet.
Okay.
My concern is, we were signalled that the agenda for the 13th of December is quite chunky and there's some pretty big topics in there. And if that's starting later in the day and we're coming in and doing full-on workshops and then supposed to be in a good headspace later to make good decisions, I would struggle with that. I mean, hey, I can stamina it, but just that's my reaction. And yeah, I don't know how others are, but once we do see that agenda, if it is heavy, well then I'll be emailing and suggesting we deal with some of that other stuff another way.
Yeah, and as I say, it really depends on the nature of the feedback council gives us this afternoon and next week. And maybe we can have a bit of a chat about what would another way look like, because that's going to require some additional time from elected members. Yeah, so we'll now move into public excluded. So we'll